Welcome back to my kitchen. I just finished an emergency harvest of tomatoes, which is on this tray and also still in here. The tomatoes are splitting before they even ripen all the way through. Even some of the green ones are splitting. So what I'm gonna do today is sort them out, and I'm gonna start making some tomato sauce and other tomato products from the tomatoes that are ripe. You can see some of them are still totally green, so I'm gonna sort these out. Now, what I normally do is if I pick tomatoes that are not quite red, I put them on a tray, put it in the dining room, and leave them for a few days. So these used to be a lot more greener, and now they are actually nice and ripe. So those I'm gonna put in this cooking pot to sort them. So those are the ripe ones that are nice. And then I'm gonna have another pot here to put anything that's sort of ripe but are split. So here we are after sorting. This is the pile that needs to be ripened on the tray. I do have a good amount of fresh eating, so I'm gonna set to the side. This is the only amount of trash I had out of the whole batch. This pot has the split tomatoes for the sauce, and this one has the good ripe tomatoes that I'm gonna use for the bruschetta that I'm gonna make and can. I'm gonna add more ripe tomatoes to this. We'll see how much more I'm gonna need. The first thing I'm gonna do is start cooking my tomato sauce. So I'm gonna my freshly frozen tomatoes, and I'm gonna start cooking. So the fresh one is on the bottom and the frozen is on the top, so eventually this will all melt together. You can see that these were tomatoes that was split, or it had a little bad part that I cut off. Those are the things that went into the freezer that I could not eat fresh, or they were just too many for me to eat. I'm gonna need another pot because as they are frozen they don't fit into one pot, but eventually they will reduce down to one pot. So I have my frozen tomatoes melting under a lid. It's just a medium right now, and I'm looking for the liquid to come up all the way to the top. That's when I know they're ready for me to process them. I expect I'm gonna have 4 quarts of tomato sauce by the time I cook them all down. These jars were clean on the shelves in my basement, but I'm gonna wash them anyway. Make sure that the rims are not damaged, and you can see that even though I washed it, there's some dried up something on it, so they were not perfectly clean. Somebody grabbed it or something, but yeah, you gotta wash it again. My tomato sauce pot actually cooked down enough so the frozen tomatoes fit into now one pot. I'm gonna keep cooking them until all the frozen tomatoes thawed out, and then we'll go to the next step. I have finished melting the frozen tomatoes and cooking them, so at this point the skin is separated, as you can see. So what I normally do is I will blend these and strain them. So I'm going to separate out the seeds and the skin from everything else. You really don't need a blender, you can just smash it by hand, but I like to use a blender. To me it's just quicker. So I fill up my blender with this mixture that I cooked down a little bit. And I do a mixture of the liquid and the pulp and skin and everything. And I will pause it just a little bit. I don't want to make the pieces too small, because then they might fall through my strainer. Just like that. Remember, this is still hot, so be careful with that. I'm gonna pour it into a fine mesh strainer into another pot. And then take my ladle and start pressing this through by just swinging it around, just twirling it around. Squeeze everything out, all the goodies. And the only thing you should left with is seeds and skin. And I'm gonna put that into my compost pile and repeat this process for a few times. So here we go. I'm gonna pour the strained juice back to the original pot because this has the heaviest bottom, and I want to cook this for a long time to cook it down into a sauce. So very nice, pretty liquidy. And I'm gonna be slowly boiling this for probably at least an hour because I want it to reduce in volume and thicken. So we'll check back in about an hour and see how it goes. Bring it to boil again and then reduce the heat just so it barely bubbles. See how it barely moves on the top? Don't know if it's visible, but you're just looking for a slight bubble. Turning it down to just simmer. And I'm gonna put on my timer for an hour, but I'm gonna come back as I remember it, and I'm gonna come and stir this. I just want to make sure it doesn't scorch. It shouldn't, but you can't be too careful. See you when it's ready. I have baked the clean jars in the oven on 215 degrees for 15 minutes to sterilize them. I always prepare more than I'm gonna need, just in case. Here's my tomato sauce, somewhat reduced. I cooked this for about an hour and a half. And you can keep cooking this until you feel that it's thick enough for you, reduced enough. I like it this way because this allows me to use this sauce for multiple applications. I can cook tomato soup out of this. I can use it for chicken tortilla soup, and I can put it into chili as well. Here's my water boiling for the water bath. There's enough water in it to just about cover my jars. So let's begin the process of canning. I also have some hot water that I'm gonna put in my lids to pre-warm them up, pre-soften them. I'm gonna put some of the rings in there too to keep them hot in the process. I picked some fresh basil leaves, and I'm gonna need a little salt. I need a wet paper towel to wipe my jar threads and the rim. I have my tools ready to go, the funnel, all of them washed. I'm gonna just start with 4 for now. Each jar will get a teaspoon of salt. And this is salt that's just natural, doesn't have any additives. You can use canning salt as well, or kosher salt. Each jar will get at least one of these basil cuttings, maybe 2, since I have plenty. And then I'm gonna start pouring the hot tomato sauce into the hot jars. I'm just gonna use this little pan to ladle them. It will speed up the process. Pour these. And you want to pour it to the very bottom of your funnel, which is going to be about a 1/4 inch from the top. That's your fill line. Fill all these for now, and we'll see how much more I need to do. just to drop more, because these have a lot of foaming on the top, so I'll make sure they're full, close to the top. Okay, now we're gonna wipe off the rims. As you can see, there's some tomato spilled. Then we're gonna get the hot lids and hot rings. And I'm gonna tighten this just enough so it's holding down the lid. And I'm gonna start loading these into my canner, which is boiling. Some people don't even water bath tomato sauce. I do. So we're gonna can it for 15 minutes. And I think I can fill up one more jar. We'll see. Some of these rings are old, so I have to make sure they do tighten. I can fit one more jar in this canner. I'm gonna try to fill up another quart. If it doesn't fill up, I can do a pint instead. So we got the basil, a teaspoon of salt, hot tomato sauce, how lucky am I? It's exactly another quart. Like if I was planning it. So again, if you cook it down more than I did, obviously you're gonna have fewer jars filled. Okay. The fifth jar goes into the canner. So here is my 5 jars in the canner water, which is just boiling water, nothing special about it. And I like my jars being covered by the water, but people say you really only have to have the water up to the neck of the jars. I've always done it this way, so keep doing it that way. Keep the water boiling for 15 minutes for quarts. Some people might say only do 10 or don't do any. I'm gonna do 15 because again, it always worked for me. Make sure the water is boiling when you start your timing. I'm done with the water bath for the 5 jars of tomato sauce. I'm gonna remove them now and just set them on the towel to cool off. In a few minutes, these will pop down, and I'm gonna leave them here for overnight until they totally cool off. And I'm gonna label them tomorrow with the date, take the rings off. I don't store with the rain, and take them to the pantry for storage. Indeterminate type of tomatoes, they just keep giving, so you will see me probably canning some more later on, but I will probably can more other type of tomato products like salsa. I will do some of that. This is a really simple way of preserving tomatoes for the winter time. There it goes, you heard the pop, and that's when it seals and pops down, because as it cools from hot, there's some vacuum within the jar that pulls it down, and that makes it seal. I had stored tomato sauce for up to 4 years. They're good as long as you don't see any mold developing on the top of it, and tomato sauce usually stores pretty well because it's acidic. And if you are trying to can some tomato that's more on the sweet side, you may want to add probably a splash of vinegar in there or some lemon juice to bring up the acidity. But for the tomatoes that I grow, this seems to be a safe way of preserving them. See you next time.